The folder sat in his hands like it carried history itself. The bank's air conditioning hummed. Nothing else dared to make a sound. A moment ago, the crowd saw a poor old man with a sack. Now, they saw a mystery. Who was he? What was in that folder? And why did his voice sound so certain? He didn't look like power, but power rarely advertises itself. The old man, Mr. Elijah Holt, didn't rush. He had learned long ago that those who panic usually lie, and those who know truth simply wait for others to catch up. He opened the folder slowly, like turning the first page of a destiny long overdue. A gold-embossed seal glimmered in the light. A county registrar emblem, original signatures in fading ink, not photocopies, not printouts. Original legal land deeds, decades old, preserved like treasure. The bank lobby, once noisy, felt like a courtroom. The security guard, Officer Douglas, swallowed hard. "Sir, what exactly are those?" Mr. Holt didn't answer him. Instead, he lifted his calm eyes to the bank manager approaching. Fast, irritated, unaware he was walking toward his own embarrassment. Richard Hale, tall, polished, a man who believed importance was measured by suit brands and office size. He walked like authority. But he spoke like someone who hadn't faced real authority yet. "The confrontation begins, Richard. What's going on here?" "Douglas, sir." He's claiming, Mr. Holt, softly finishing the sentence, "that this bank stands on my land." Richard let out a small disbelieving laugh. "You own this location?" Elijah lifted the historic deed, holding it like truth itself. "I purchased this property 62 years ago." Richard stared, searching for a catch, a loophole, anything he could dismiss. "Sir, this is private property. I'm asking you to leave." Elijah's tone stayed gentle but unbreakable. "Young man, I am standing on my private property. You're the one doing business here." Some people gasped. A few smiled nervously. Others pretended to check their phones so they wouldn't get caught staring, but kept watching. Humiliation turns to unease. A woman who earlier clutched her purse suddenly looked down, ashamed. The young man who joked went quiet. The teller who smirked earlier slowly sat straighter. This wasn't comedy anymore, and Elijah hadn't raised his voice even once. "The manager tests." Richard crossed his arms. "Sir, anyone can print old documents. You'll need to leave until we verify," Elijah interrupted, still gentle but firm. "Real ownership isn't printed. Real ownership is earned, signed, and sealed by time." He handed over the county-stamped renewal certificate. Dated, notarized, legal, verified, not fantasy. Not delusion, fact. Richard took it reluctantly. His fingers trembled slightly, not from fear yet, but from confusion colliding with arrogance. He looked at the document again. Then again, no matter how many times his ego blinked. The ink did not disappear. "Douglas," he whispered, stunned. "Call HQ now." The guard nodded, voice suddenly respectful. "Yes, sir." Eyes begin to change. Elijah breathed calmly, like a man who had waited decades to speak truth and finally felt the world listening. People whispered now, but not mockingly. They whispered questions. Is he really the landowner? Why would he dress like that? Why carry the deeds in a sack? Why didn't the bank know? A little boy tugged his mother's sleeve. "Mom, is he a rich man?" His mother whispered softly, "He might be something better." A man who never needed to show off. A voice from the line. Someone called out, a young businesswoman, confident and curious. "Sir, why didn't you tell anyone all these years?" Elijah looked at her kindly. "Because respect given only to wealth isn't respect at all." Silence. That sentence hit like a sermon. Power isn't loud. Power simply is. Flashback. Glimpse. Hint of why. For a moment, Elijah's eyes drifted to another time, another life. A dusty field. A young man in worn clothes. A handshake on a bare plot of land. People laughing then too. "Waste of money," they said. "No future here," they mocked. Back then, Elijah had smiled. The same calm smile he wore now. He didn't buy the land because he was rich. He became rich because he understood value before others did. And now, decades later, the world finally caught up. Back to the bank. Richard returned. face drained. Sir, corporate confirmed the deed record. It's real. A silence fell that felt holy. People who mocked him lowered their heads. Some swallowed hard. A teller slowly put away his sarcastic grin. Even the security guard straightened respectfully. Richard's voice cracked. Mr. Holt, we were unaware. I apologize for any disrespect. Elijah looked at him. Not angry, not vengeful. Disappointed. You judged the bag. And the coat. And the shoes. But not the man. Richard's lips trembled. No comeback left. Final punch of part 1. Elijah picked up his sack and tied it carefully. I did not come to punish you, he said. I came to remind you. Remind us of what? Someone asked quietly. He turned, eyes gentle but powerful enough to silence the room, that some of the richest people in life walked. The cold air outside the bank brushed Elijah's face as the doors closed behind him. Inside there was silence and regret. Outside there was peace and memory. He stood for a moment, letting sunlight warm his weathered skin. Most people only saw wrinkles and worn clothes. Few ever understood the storms a quiet face had survived. He tightened his grip on the sack and slowly walked down the street. Flashback. 62 years earlier, a dusty road, fields stretching to the horizon. No skyscrapers, no glass buildings, no banks. Just earth, sweat, and hope. A young Elijah, barely in his 20s, walked miles each morning. Boots full of holes. Hands calloused like old bark. People in town knew him as the boy who never wasted time. He worked all day. He read all night. And he believed quietly, fiercely. His father once told him, "Son, land is the only thing they can't print more of. If you ever get a chance to own land, you hold it no matter who laughs." And life tested him early. He worked as a cleaner at a small hardware shop. He cleaned windows, scraped floors, carried heavy crates. He saved every penny. Sleeping on a straw mattress, eating leftovers, patching clothes instead of buying new ones. People called him stubborn. Some called him foolish. Why save so much? They joked. You'll die poor anyway. He only smiled because he knew something they didn't. Patience builds empires quietly. The offer. Nobody wanted. One hot afternoon, he overheard 2 old farmers arguing near the well. That land by the creek? Waste of soil. Rock everywhere. Hard to farm. No water supply. Only a fool would buy that land. Elijah's ears sharpened. That land was cheap, dirt cheap, because no one believed in it, and sometimes all success needs is one believer. He ran to the county office the next morning, pockets full of saved coins, bills folded carefully, dreams bigger than his hunger. The county clerk looked at him with disbelief. You want that land? Elijah nodded. You sure? A man could starve farming that ground. Elijah smiled softly. I don't plan to starve. I plan to wait. The clerk stamped the paper, shaking his head in amusement. Land's worthless. But it's yours now. Worthless, the word echoed loudly back then. And yet today the entire town sat on it. Roads, buildings, businesses, and yes, a bank. Sometimes the world calls your blessing worthless before God reveals its value. Laughter from the past. When Elijah returned home with his deed, neighbors laughed. A man leaned on his fence, chewing wheat straw. You bought dirt nobody wants? Elijah nodded. Yes, sir. And what will you do? Plant rocks? More laughter. Another neighbor shook his head. With your brains, you could have moved to the city and worked a real job. Instead, you threw your savings away. Elijah looked down at the paper in his hand. Not shame, not doubt, just patience sometimes, he said quietly. A seed doesn't look like much either. They laughed louder. People always laugh at faith before it becomes visible. Hunger, cold, and faith. The first years were the hardest. Winter nights with one blanket, bread and soup too thin to fill a stomach. Long days hauling lumber and doing odd jobs to survive. Some days he questioned himself, but he never quit. When he was too tired to stand, he whispered, one day this land will matter. And as years passed, the town grew. A grocery store was built. Then houses. Then a school. Businesses followed the people. Road signs changed. Land prices rose like the sun, and the worthless land became prime property. People who once laughed now whispered, smart man, lucky man. He must have known something he didn't know. He simply believed, Faith is knowledge without evidence, until time supplies the proof. The bank arrives. Decades later, developers approached Elijah. "We want to build a bank on this land," they offered proudly. "We can pay you up front." Elijah smiled politely and shook his head. "No, I don't want a lump of money. I want something that lasts longer." They frowned. "What do you want then?" He said it gently. "Lease it from me, and treat me with respect." Lawyers thought he was insane not to sell. Developers smirked. They agreed only because they believed he'd never come back to check. After signing, one man even whispered behind him, "He won't live long. And when he dies, this land is ours." Elijah heard it. He never reacted. Life doesn't need revenge. Truth returns by itself. Why he stayed humble? He could have bought fancy cars, modern suits, a big house. Instead, he kept working. He kept walking. He kept wearing humble clothes and carrying that old brown sack, the same one his father once used when working the fields. Why? Because success doesn't change who you are. It reveals who you always were. And Elijah never needed the world to see wealth on his body, as long as wealth lived in his heart and in his values. People forgot his face over the years. The bank forgot their agreement. Respect disappeared, so he returned, not for money, but for principle. To remind a world obsessed with appearances, greatness often arrives disguised as simplicity. Back the next morning, Grand Oak National Bank was not the same place it had been yesterday. Gone were the smirks. Gone were the dismissive looks. Gone was the arrogance. In its place lingered a strange mix of silence and realization. People didn't just remember the old man's words, they felt them. Respect has nothing to do with appearance. That sentence still rattled through every corner of the building like a quiet thunderstorm. At home with Elijah. Meanwhile, Elijah Holt sat at his small wooden kitchen table, sunlight spilling across the worn grain. His house was modest, clean but simple. A kettle steamed gently, filling the room with warmth. He spread marmalade on toast, slow, steady, grateful. To anyone watching, he looked like a man with nothing urgent to do, but his phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Bank calls, legal calls, media calls, messages from numbers he hadn't seen in decades. He sighed, glanced at the phone, ignored it. He didn't crave attention. He didn't want revenge. He simply wanted respect and truth to stand on its feet. He whispered a verse his mother taught him long ago. "A quiet heart is a rich man's comfort." At the bank, panic mode inside the bank. Manager Richard Hale was sweating through his shirt. Lawyers sat in his office. Corporate HQ executives were on video call screens. Security chief stood at the door. Everyone had one question. How did this happen? Richard rubbed his forehead. "I didn't know who he was." The corporate executive frowned. "You judged him by his clothes." Richard's throat tightened. He couldn't deny it, not now. Another lawyer spoke. "Mr. Holt owns the land. He holds long-term rights. Legally, he has leverage over the property. If he wanted to terminate our lease," everyone flinched. "He won't," Richard said quietly. "How do you know?" Richard swallowed. "Because power doesn't need to threaten, and dignity doesn't need to shout." They stared at him, surprised at the wisdom from a man who just learned humility yesterday. The bank calls Elijah. The bank's assistant picked up the phone nervously and dialed. Elijah answered after the third ring. "Calm as ever, Mr. Holt," the assistant said, voice uncertain. The bank, would like to request a meeting." "I see." Richard quickly took the phone. "Sir, Mr. Holt, I believe we owe you a formal apology, and a discussion." Elijah smiled faintly. "A discussion is fine, son. Apology is optional. Respect is not." Richard closed his eyes, humbled. "Can you come today?" "No," Elijah replied gently. "Not today? Tomorrow?" "I'll come when my feet feel ready." Richard blinked. He wasn't used to someone who lived beyond corporate schedule. Elijah ended the call politely, then went on eating his toast because a man who waited 62 years could wait one more day. News travels fast by afternoon. The story had quietly begun to spread, not through media, but through whispers. A young woman who had been in the bank that day told her sister. Her sister told a coworker. Someone posted a vague message online. Never judge someone by their clothes. You never know who's walking in humility. No names, no location. Just truth. Curiously, it still spread. Not viral. Not explosive. Just quiet and steady. Exactly like Elijah. Elijah visits the past later that day. Elijah walked to the edge of town, down a quiet dirt path no one used anymore. He reached an old wooden fence, sun-faded and leaning with age. Beyond it was the land, stretching wide and golden. The land everyone once mocked. The land nobody wanted. He touched the fence gently, whispering, "I told you. One day they would see your worth." He remembered the sweat, the hunger, the nights alone, the ridicule, the doubt that nearly overcame him, until belief carried him further. Not belief in land. Belief in divine timing. His father's voice echoed in his mind. You don't need people to believe in you. You just need time to reveal God's plan. Elijah closed his eyes, and for a moment, he was young again, holding his first deed paper with trembling hands, dreaming a future no one else could picture. He didn't buy earth. He bought destiny. Meanwhile, at the bank again, inside the bank, two tellers whispered at the back, "Imagine owning the land under a bank. It's unbelievable." "No," the older teller corrected gently. "What's unbelievable is how easy it is to mistake humility for weakness." The younger teller looked down, ashamed, remembering his smirk from yesterday. "Will he evict us?" "I doubt it." "Why? Did you see his eyes? He's not here for revenge. He's here to remind us who we should be." Elijah's evening walk sunset poured gold across the street as Elijah headed home. Children played nearby. A man jogged past. Life moved as usual, but occasionally, someone looked at him with a curious pause, like sensing something extraordinary beneath the ordinary. A grocery clerk held the door for him and said, "Evening, sir." Elijah smiled. Respect didn't need to be shouted. Morning sunlight poured gently through Elijah Holt's kitchen window, painting warm gold across the wooden table. He sat quietly, sipping tea from a chipped mug, the same mug he used for decades. Some men start their day with urgency. Elijah started his with gratitude. His phone buzzed again. Bank call. Same number as yesterday. He let it ring, then answered on the final vibration. Richard Hale spoke carefully, like each word was balancing on regret. "Mr. Holt, we humbly request your presence today. Our executives have prepared a formal meeting." Elijah took another slow sip. "All right, son. I'll be there." He hung up first. Power isn't in who calls. Power is in who controls their peace. Arrival at the bank. This time, when Elijah walked through the glass doors, there was no laughter. Heads turned, not mocking, but respectful. A receptionist immediately stood. "Good morning, sir. Welcome back." The security guard who once eyed him suspiciously stepped forward. "Mr. Holt, sir, welcome. Please allow me to escort you." Touch of nervousness in his voice. Touch of shame in his eyes. Elijah nodded. "No need for sir. I'm just Elijah." That made the guard smile, relieved and humbled. Even when he had the right to demand honor, Elijah chose kindness. True dignity doesn't require a throne, just a steady heart. Walking past humbled faces, people in line lowered their gaze respectfully. A woman who once clutched her purse now whispered, "Good morning," like greeting someone sacred. The young teller who smirked earlier swallowed hard. Welcome back, Mr. Holt." Elijah simply nodded. He didn't come to punish them with ego. Their conscience already did that. Sometimes the loudest apology is a lowered head. The corporate room double-glass doors opened to a long boardroom table. Executives, lawyers, branch leaders. Richard Hale at the head, suit perfect, confidence gone. When Elijah entered, everyone stood. "Mr. Holt," Richard said softly, "thank you for honoring us with your time." Elijah smiled gently. "Son, time is meant to be shared, not honored." They sat, everyone else stayed quiet. The apology. Richard took a deep breath. "Mr. Holt, yesterday we failed you. We judged you by appearance, not by fact or dignity." He paused, then continued, eyes lowered. "We are deeply ashamed. On behalf of our bank and our staff, we apologize." A senior executive added, "Your patience and grace humbled us more than anger ever could." Elijah placed his hands on the table. Not heavy. Not accusing. Apology accepted. Gasps. Soft, stunned. They expected demands. They prepared for threats. They braced for lawsuits. Instead, he brought peace, because the wise don't need to hurt others to heal themselves. They offer compensation. A lawyer pushed forward a stack of documents. We owe you decades of land lease payments and interest. We are prepared to settle. Numbers, large enough to shake a trained banker's pulse. Everyone waited. Elijah didn't look at the papers. Instead, he folded his hands and asked calmly, "What do you think I want?" Confusion. Silence. Richard blinked. "The payment?" Elijah chuckled, soft like summer wind through wheat fields. "Son, if wealth was all I wanted, I could have taken it long ago." Executives exchanged looks, baffled. "What do you want, Mr. Holt?" Elijah looked around the table, eyes warm, voice deeper. "I want every person who enters this building, rich or poor, polished or worn, to be treated with respect." Stunned silence. "That is all I ask." Conscience awakened. An older board member slowly nodded, eyes emotional. "You would forgive debts and take respect instead?" Elijah smiled. "My debts are already paid by life. I want to pay forward." Richard's throat tightened. "This changes everything," Elijah continued. "Maybe God didn't give me wealth to spend, but to show what it looks like when wealth doesn't own you." The room fell into a respectful stillness, a modest request. "And," Elijah added gently, "there is one small thing I do want." Everyone leaned in. "Place a small bench outside the bank and a sign that says, 'Rest here. Every soul deserves a place to breathe.'" A murmur of awe filled the room. Richard blinked fast, holding back emotion. "That will be done today." A quiet thank you. Another executive spoke softly. "Mr. Holt, most men in your position demand power. You brought humility." Elijah stood slowly, gathering his sack. "Power comes and goes," he replied, "but character, that leaves footprints." Richard walked around the table, voice trembling slightly. "Mr. Holt, you didn't just teach us a policy lesson. You taught us humanity." Elijah touched his shoulder gently. "No, son. Life did. I only reminded you." Leaving the boardroom as Elijah walked out, even the lawyers stood straighter, not out of duty but out of respect. He passed the lobby again. This time, no one stared at his coat. No one judged his sack. Instead, smiles, nods, warm greetings. People didn't see a poor old man. They saw value, not because he owned land, but because he owned himself. Outside the bank, the sun greeted him. A breeze lifted gently, like nature. The sun was setting. A soft golden glow spilled across the quiet streets as Elijah Holt walked slowly away from the bank, the same worn sack resting on his shoulder like always. He didn't hurry. He didn't celebrate. He simply breathed, as a man who had already won long before anyone noticed. Some victories don't come with applause. Some victories come with peace. The bench. The very next morning, the bank staff worked outside. Men drilled. Workers painted. A carpenter tightened bolts on a brand new bench. The sign went up in fresh bronze letters. "Rest here. Every soul deserves a place to breathe." Holt people walking by stopped, stared. Some teared up, not a plaque about money, not a donation wall, just a bench, a seat of dignity. Sometimes the greatest monuments are the simplest ones, the kind made for the tired, not the proud. The town begins to talk by noon. The whispers spread again, not mocking this time, but full of awe. That old man isn't just wealthy, he's wise. He could have taken millions, but asked for kindness instead. My grandmother said he used to help folks buy food in the old days. He never told anyone? No, because some people don't do good to be seen. Employees said his name with reverence. Mr. Holt, not that old man, anymore. Names matter less when respect does the talking. Richard Hale's transformation inside his office. Richard Hale stared at the bench through the glass window, hands clasped in front of him. His world had changed. Money, titles, corner office, and suddenly they felt hollow. He whispered to himself, "Integrity. That's the real wealth." A soft knock. One of the young tellers, the one who once laughed, stood at the door. "Sir, I wanted to say, I'll never treat anyone like that again." Richard nodded slowly. Neither will I. And for once, those weren't words for formality. They were words for life. Elijah's quiet routine continues. While the town buzzed with his story, Elijah didn't check the news or answer interviews. He tied his shoes, fed birds in the yard, watered a small garden of marigolds. Old rhythm, same humility. He walked to the park later that afternoon, the place where he spent evenings feeding ducks as a younger man. A little girl sat crying on a bench nearby, clutching a broken toy. Elijah sat beside her gently. "What troubles you, little one?" "My toy broke. Mama says I should throw it away." Elijah smiled, eyes warm. Same softness he offered the world before the world acknowledged him. Everything broken isn't meant to be thrown away. Some things are meant to be fixed with patience. He pulled a tiny toolkit from his coat, a habit from years of careful living, and with steady hands, tightened the small screw on her doll. The girl's tears dried into awe. "You fixed it." "No, sweetheart," he chuckled softly. "I just helped it remember how to stay together." She hugged him, pure, innocent gratitude. Children don't need to know your worth to recognize your heart. A stranger approaches. A man approached, young, tired, suit wrinkled. "Sir, are you the man from the bank story? The landowner?" Elijah didn't flinch, perhaps, but today I'm simply someone feeding the ducks. The man sat, shoulders heavy. "I lost my job last week. I came here to think. I feel worthless." Elijah looked him in the eyes, steady, reflective. Worth doesn't leave when work does. The man's lip trembled. "How did you stay strong when life was hard?" Elijah smiled faintly. "I learned that storms don't break you. They shape you." The man swallowed hard, tears threatening. "What should I do now?" Elijah placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Don't rush. Don't fear. If a door closes, it was not your room. Walk until the right one opens." The man nodded, breathing easier. People expect wealth to give advice about money, but the greatest wealth gives wisdom about living. The final reflection. That evening, Elijah sat on his porch as dusk settled, painting the sky in purple and gold. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Thank you for letting me rise." Without stepping on anyone to get here, he never needed statues.